Environmental protesters say that they've managed to stop Network Rail from chopping down trees along a railway line near Whitstable in Kent. 3 women chained themselves to trees they claim are home to rare nesting birds, as well as protecting residents from railway noise. Network Rail have now agreed to delay any further clearance until September, as Tom Clark now reports.
A fine day for some trackside maintenance. Network Rail contractors had arrived for some planned tree clearance work, but they hadn't counted on the good people of Whitstable.
Viva Whitstable! Viva Whitstable!
They have a vocal leader and a dedicated youth wing in battle dress. This is a local guerrilla movement to protect the wooded embankment that backs onto many of their homes. And to the bemusement of the men in high vis, a group chained to the trees, and not just birdsong filling the wood.
We shall not be moved just like a tree that's standing by the railway line.
This is Network Rail's property. Don't they have the right to cut down the trees, and why are you challenging that right?
We think they have a responsibility to maintain the trackside responsibly, and they're not doing that. They're just hell-bent on absolute wanton destruction. It's environmental vandalism. It's going to destroy the quality of the air in this area. This is the only real swathe of trees we have in Whitstable now.
This is what campaigners are trying to stop. A section of what used to be trackside woodland completely felled by Network Rail just a couple of miles down the track. Now, it might only be a few trees, but what campaigners argue is that because Network Rail manage the entire nation's rail network, their policy of trackside clearance adds up to nationwide deforestation. Across the 20,000-mile rail network, groups have mobilised in protest against Network Rail's plans to chainsaw their local embankments or cuttings. In a statement today, Network Rail told us,
as well as causing the track to become unstable, trees and plants can also cover up signals, fall onto tracks and overhead power lines. Where necessary, we manage the vegetation so smaller plants are closer to the tracks and larger trees further away.
But try telling that to the people of Enfield in North London. Their suburb isn't so leafy now. Residents are still pressing Network Rail as to why so many mature oaks and sycamores had to be cleared from this huge site last year. The company says it has plans to restore it. But back in Whitstable, the law is on the protesters' side. The Wildlife and Countryside Act makes it illegal to cut down vegetation that's home to nesting birds.
It would be reasonable to assume that it's full of breeding birds, and to chop those trees down would be an illegal act.
So the police seem to be here to police the protesters, but shouldn't they actually be policing Network Rail?
Well, I think so. I think if there's a criminal offence occurring here, then the police should be looking at Network Rail rather than protesters.
As it turns out, there was no criminal offence. After a brief site inspection, Network Rail announced the work would be postponed until September. But the Whitstable protesters vow they will reoccupy the woods unless a full consultation and independent review of the work is carried out first.
Tom Clark reporting.